Welcome everyone to another poker vlog. In this episode, I'm playing a cash game at Deuce's Poker. The blinds are 1-2 with frequent $5 straddles. There's also a $3 or $5 bomb pot every orbit where we play mixed games such as double Board PLO, Drawmaha, double barrel. And I understand that mixed games are not necessarily everyone's cup of tea, so instead of showing the hands in chronological order, I decided to separate Hold'em from mixed games. That way, if you only want to watch Hold'em, you don't have to sit through the mixed games and vice versa. Okay, so first, let's kick things off with the answer to last week's tough spot. I want to take a quick moment to thank everyone who participated. This was my first time doing something of the sort, and it was really cool to see a lot of you comment and try to guess my opponent's hand. Let's roll the clip from last week. I pick up Jack 8 of hearts on the cutoff. The low jack opens up the action to 10, the hijack calls, and I decide to spice things up a little here by 3-betting to 40. Only the low jack makes the call, and we go heads up to a flop of 9, jack, deuce, rainbow. We hit top pair. The low jack checks to me, I c-bet for 40, and the low jack calls. Turn comes a queen, and on this card, we both check. The river comes a 4, and surprisingly, my opponent snap bets $100, and I go well into the tank. I ultimately decide on a disciplined fold, and now let's take a look at what my opponent showed. King Queen. Congrats to Ronnie, who pretty much nailed it. Shout out to you, Ronnie. Alright, let's jump into this week's action. In this hand, I look down at pocket queens and the hijack, and the $5 button straddle is on. 3 players call before I raise the action to $20. The cutoff, button, and small blind make the call. The big blind, who initially called the straddle, now decides to 3-bet to 115. When action comes back to me, I 4-bet jam for 293. Action folds to the small blind, who calls for less, and now the big blind goes into the tank.
I'm ready to go.
They eventually make the call, and we head 3 ways to a run out. The flop comes king 10-3 with 2 diamonds. The big blind flips over pocket 10s, and I am gutted. Turn comes another king. River is an ace, and once again the evening is off to a rough start. In this hand, we join the action on a flop of 3 jack 7 rainbow, on which I check. Turns out I'm in the big blind with jack 3, and I flopped 2 pair. Action checks around to the low jack, who bets 10, folds around to me, I bump it up to 30, and the low jack calls. Turn is the deuce of diamonds, I lead out for 45, and the low jack folds. In this hand, I pick up what I call the crybaby, queen 4 offsuit in the big blind. Pre-flop, there were 2 limps from the low jack and hijack, and I checked my option. We joined the action on the flop of 4 queen king with 2 spades, giving me 2 pair. I lead out for $5. The low jack calls, and the hijack raises to 15. I could go either way between a call and a raise. I think the hijack is a very competent and aggressive player who perceives me as pretty tight, so I elect to call in order to keep all his bluffs in. The low jack gets out of the way, and we go heads up to the turn, which comes the jack of spades, completing the spade flush draw. Since my opponent raised on the flop, I'm going to let them keep the betting lead by checking, but this time they check back. The river is the 4 of diamonds, upgrading me from 2 pair to a boat. I don't want my opponent to check back, so I lead for 20, but it doesn't look like they had much as they quickly fold. In this hand, I look down at pocket kings, and the $5 button straddle is on. The small blind raises blind to $10. The low jack raises to 35. Love to see it. When action gets to me, I 3-bet to 80 with the intention of jamming the flop if I get called. Folds back around to the low jack, who makes the call. The flop comes 7-10-5 with 2 spades, and the low jack checks to me. For some reason, I decided that this flop almost always misses my opponent, so I decide to give them the free turn card in hopes that they catch something to call my delayed all-in. No! 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 The turn comes the ace of spades. Are you freaking kidding me? And of course, my opponent snap bets enough to put me all in, and now I go deep into the tank. Not because I'm trying to put them on the range of hands. I know they have the ace, but because I'm trying to decide what to do. Do I call or do I fold? I tanked for about 2.5 minutes, during which I asked my opponent if they would run it twice, to which they answered no, before finally making the fold. I looked this spot up after the fact, and it does look like a call there would have been incorrect versus any kind of ace-x holding, so even though I'm not happy with the result, I can live with the decision. In this hand, I pick up ace-10 offsuit in the small blind, under the gun raises to 5, the low jack calls, the cutoff calls, I don't love it, but I call, and the big blind calls as well. We go 5 ways to a flop of ace, 5, 4 with 2 diamonds. Pretty good flop for me, but I'm going to proceed with caution in this multi-way pot. I want to try and get to a showdown as cheaply as possible. The under the gun player c-bets for 25, and I am the only player to make the call. The turn is the queen of hearts, and this time, action checks around. The river is the 6 of diamonds, which completes the flush. I'm pretty sure I have the best hand at this point, but I don't want to value cut myself in case my opponent does have a bigger ace, or put myself in a difficult spot if they decide to raise. I check with the intention of calling a bet, but my opponent checks back. I flip over my hand thinking it's good, but under the gun shows ace 6 for a rivered 2 pair. On to the next hand. In this one, I look down at pocket 10s in the under the gun 1 position. There's a raise to 12 from under the gun. I could call a raise here. At this point, I'm pretty deflated, so I take the low variance route and I call, looking to hit a set. But the middle position player has different plans. They shove for around 120. Action folds around to me. I know this player is only doing this with a very good hand, although I do feel they would have gone for a smaller 3-bet if they were holding aces or kings. And the way things have been going, I don't think I can find a fold here. I asked if they would run it twice, to which they agree, and that's all I need to hear to make the call. I'm up against ace-king, and we're going to see 2 full boards. Let's go, let's hold. First board is pretty favorable, as it comes 10 high, giving me top set. But of course, the turn has to bring a sweat, giving my opponent a straight, flush, and a straight flush draw. But thankfully, the river is a clean jack of diamonds, and we pick up the first pot. Somehow, my opponent keeps finding spades in this deck as the flop comes 3, 5, 9 with 2 spades. Once again, it's a sweat on the turn as they pick up a straight draw. I am 1 card away from scooping this spot. God knows I need it, but no. Of course, it's the freaking Barry Greenstein on the river. I was tilted then, and I am almost getting tilted watching this footage again. This concludes the Hold'em portion of the vlog. Mixed games bonk pots are coming up next. Please stick around, there's going to be plenty of crazy action and big pots. Before we jump into the next hand, I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button real quick. It's completely free, but it does help me tremendously to grow the channel and to keep me motivated to make vlogs in the middle of a downswing such as the one I've been experiencing for the past month or so. If you like the content and haven't already, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss any of my next videos. I'm going to Vegas soon to play in my first WSOP tournament, so there's lots of exciting content in the pipeline. Thank you so much for the support. Now, let's jump into some mixed game action. Let's start with some double board PLO. In this hand, I get dealt King 6-6-5 Deuce, so I'm going to be looking to hit a set or a flush. The bottom board comes Ace 6-8 with 2 hearts, and the top comes 10 Queen 4 with 2 diamonds. Not much going on top, but I do flop a set on bottom along with the nut flush draw. That's good enough for me. I bet 30. 2 players to my left make the call. We had 3 ways to the turn, Ace of spades on bottom, 9 of diamonds on top. I now improved to 6 full, but I do have to be a little bit concerned about someone holding a bigger boat with Ace 8, for example. Since I don't have anything going on top, I decide to slow down, pot control, and check. The player to my left bets $75. The other player gets out of the way, and now that we're heads up, I'm actually pretty confident that I have the best hand on bottom and that my opponent is going for top. Heads up to the river, which comes the jack of hearts on bottom and the king of spades on top. With $80 left in my stack, I'm pretty certain that my opponent is going to put me all in if I check to them. So I decide to take the initiative and jam. Unsurprisingly, they call, and we do have the best hand on bottom with 6s full of aces, while they have the nut flush on top with Ace 7 of diamonds. So we're going to chop this one. In this next hand, we're playing 4-card PLO, and I look down at Jack Jack 8 Deuce with 2 spades. 9 players go to the flop of 4-9-3 rainbow on bottom and 10-10-5 rainbow on top. The low jack makes a really small bet of $10. My read on the situation is that they're value betting a 10 and that my jacks are probably good on bottom, as it's a little bit harder for my opponents to have queens or better in 4-card PLO than it is in 5-card PLO. I could still be losing to a set or a weird 2-pair, so when 2 other players make the call, I'm going to proceed with caution. 4 ways to the turn, which comes the 3 of hearts on bottom and the 7 of hearts on top. The low jack once again makes a really small bet of $15. There are no straights or flushes possible at this point in the hand, and with both boards being paired, I decide to peel once more in hopes of hitting a jack on either board. The 2 other players fold and we go heads up to the river, which comes the king of clubs on bottom and a queen of diamonds on top. I obviously really hate this bottom river because if my jacks were good up to this point, any random king in my opponent's hand now beats me. To make matters worse, they now size up and bet $100. I'm still pretty confident in my read that they're going for the top board, and the bigger sizing most likely indicates that they filled up with a hand like Queen 10. That being said, I still have a pretty difficult decision on bottom. They could very easily have a king, but they could also just be trying to rob me of my half of the pot with the nuts on top. I tank for about a minute and a half, and although double board PLO is not the game where you want to make hero calls, I decide to go with my gut and make the call. Thankfully, my opponent says,
Good call, good call.
And it looks like I correctly read the situation as they show Queen 10 for the nut boat on top, and my pair of jacks is good on bottom, so we chop this one too. Let's move on to some double barrel. It's basically the same as double board PLO, except that only the highest hand overall wins, along with the best low hand. To make a low, you're looking to have 5 unpaired cards under an 8. The lower your highest card is, the better. In this hand, I get dealt Ace King 9-8-3 with the nut diamond draw and a pretty good shot at a nut low with Ace 3. We go 6 ways to a flop of Jack 6-9 with 2 diamonds on bottom and 4-10 King with 2 spades on top. I pick up the nut flush draw on bottom and action checks around. The turn comes a 10 of clubs on bottom and a 6 of diamonds on top. Too bad this is not high or else I would be drawing to the nuts on both boards. That being said, I do pick up a nice 6 high low draw to go with my nut flush draw on bottom. A late position player bets 25, the button calls. With a draw to the nut high and a decent draw to a low, I make the call and so does the middle position player. We go 4 ways to a river. I break out on bottom as it comes the 3 of spades. However, the 7 of clubs on top does give me the second nut straight as well as the second nut low. Action checks around and we go to a showdown. It looks like I'm going to chop the high hand with the middle position player who made the same straight as I did, and unfortunately the late position player has the nut low with Ace Deuce. So we end up getting quartered, meaning the middle position player and myself get a quarter of the pot, and the late position player gets half. In this one, we are dealt King, Jack, Jack, 8-5 with some decent flushes, straights, and set potential, but nothing really going for us as far as low hands are concerned. We go 6 ways to a flop of 4-3-5 rainbow on bottom and 7 Jack Deuce on top with 2 diamonds. We head top set. I check, the under the gun 1 player bets 10, called by the hijack and the button. I make the call as well. 4 ways to the turn, which comes a 9 of diamonds on bottom and a queen of hearts on top. The hijack takes the lead for 25, the button calls. I don't love it in retrospect, but I make the call as well, thinking that my set of jacks is most likely good on top for the high hand. Really, this should have been a fold as I'm already losing to 6-7, which would be the nut straight on bottom, and there's a ton of rivers that are going to weaken my set of jacks. The under the gun 1 player also makes the call, and we go 4 ways to the river. We are looking to make a full house here. Sadly, I break out as bottom comes the deuce of hearts and top comes the 4 of hearts. Action checks around, and our set is no longer good as the hijack shows Ace 6 of hearts for the nut flush, and they're going to scoop this entire pot as that gives them the best low hand with Ace Deuce 4-6-7. In this following hand, we're playing 4-card double barrel, and I get dealt what I would consider a premium for this game, Ace Jack Deuce Deuce with the nut diamond draw, and the fact I'm holding 2 deuces means it's very likely that I will be the only player making the nut low if 3 cards under an 8 were to come by the river on either board. We go 8 ways to a flop of 9-6 Jack Rainbow on bottom and Deuce 4 Queen Rainbow on top. Not the best flop for me. I do flop a set of deuces, but it's unlikely to be best by the river, and I only have a backdoor draw to the nut low. Action checks around. The turn comes the 8 of spades on bottom and the 6 of clubs on top. The low jack player bets 10, the cutoff calls, and then the button raises to 80. With better lows possible on the top board, I now have to fold. I wanted to show this hand because it's pretty tilting to start a hand with ace deuce deuce and not be able to make a good low hand. It's just another form of run bad, which seems to be the theme of the night for me. One last hand of double barrel. In this one I get dealt queen jack 8-6-5. Not a great starting hand by any means, but since this is a bomb pot, I get to see a flop anyway, and so do 7 other players. Bottom comes jack jack 4 with 2 diamonds, and top comes ace knight 8 rainbow, so I flop trips on bottom and not much on top. Even though I most likely have the best hand on bottom, it's still a pretty vulnerable holding in this game, so I'm going to exercise some caution here, check, and see if I can boat up. Action checks around, and the turn comes the ace of diamonds on bottom and the 9 of diamonds on top. Small blind leads out for 15 and is called by 2 players before action gets to me. With a flush possible on top, a full house possible on bottom, and no real draw to a low hand, I decide to make a disciplined fold here. Wish I would have made the call though, as the bottom river comes a queen, which would have given me the best high hand. Of course, hindsight is 20/20, and I did make the correct laydown on the turn, but once again, just tilting to not win a pot and continue to bleed chips. 4 hands of double barrel, and the best I could do was get quartered. The tilt is real. Let's switch things up and see if Drawmaha will treat me better. In this hand, I get dealt ace 8-8 deuce deuce, so I start with 2 pair down, and I have some good set as well as nut flush potential here. 6 ways to a flop of 3 deuce 5 rainbow. I flop a set of deuces, I bet 20, and the player behind me raises to 90. At this point in the evening, there's no way I'm ever folding here, and so if I'm never folding, I might as well just jam the rest of my stack in. So that's what I do. I raise to 230 and my opponent snap calls. I feel pretty confident that my down hand is good as they draw 3 cards, so they probably only have a pair. Let's hope they don't make trips. I draw 1 hoping to boat up, but I get the 7 of clubs. Let's see if we can boat up on the board, which might give us the best hand. Unfortunately, I did not note the turn and river, but the board did not pair. Our opponent announces they have a straight on board and a pair down, so we're going to chop this pot. I know everyone loves a chop pot, but I would really love to scoop one right about now. In this next hand, we join the action on the flop of deuce 7 queen with 2 clubs. The big blind bets $10, and I look down at king jack 3-3-3, so I start this hand with trips, which is pretty strong. The cutoff calls. I'm obviously not going anywhere with my trips. I make the call, and so does the small blind. Time to draw, and the only player I worry about is the small blind, who only draws 1, so they probably have 2 pair, or a draw to a straight or a flush. I'll have to keep an eye on what they do on later streets. I'm going to hold on to my trips and draw 2 to see if I can pick up anything interesting as far as the PLO hand is concerned. I draw a jack and a 10, and the turn comes the deuce of hearts. Still not very much going on for me on the board. Small blind checks, which is good. I'm not pretty confident that my trips are good. The big blind continues the aggression by betting 50. I'm the only player to make the call, and we go heads up to the river, which comes the 6 of clubs. The big blind checks, and in retrospect, if I was confident my trips were good, I should have taken this opportunity to put some pressure on my opponent and try to scoop the entire pot, but in game, I decided to check back. The big blind shows queen deuce for deuces full of queens on the board, so we are once again going to chop this one. In this hand, we join the action on the flop of king 10 king rainbow, and I look down at king queen 8-5-3 with 4 spades. Let's go. Maybe this is going to be the hand I've been patiently waiting for. With trips on the board and 4 to a flush, I bet 20, and only the big blind and under the gun player call. Draw time. Big blind draws 1, under the gun draws 2. I get rid of my queen of diamonds and draw 1. Be a spade. Be a spade. Be a fuck. Come on, dealer, one time. As Norman Chad would say, I have squad douche as far as my downhand goes, so when action checks to me, I'm going to exercise some caution here and check back. Really hoping I can boat up on the river, which comes the 9 of clubs. And before you get too excited, we're playing Omaha on the board, so That 9 does not give me a full house, as I have to use 2 cards from my hand and 3 from the board, so I still only have trip kings, and when the small blind bets 75 and the under the gun player calls, I know I'm no good here, so I fold. The small blind shows 10-10-7-7 for a boat on the board and 2 pair down, and they're going to scoop this pot. Once again, I start strong but don't quite get there. It seems like everyone is scooping pots but me, and I'm getting increasingly frustrated. In this hand, we join the action on the flop, which comes 5-3 ace with 2 hearts, and I look down at king 10, crap. Action checks around, and it's time to draw. The small blind draws 2, I draw the maximum of 3, the player to my left draws 2. Don't remember how many cards the other players drew, but I pick up ace queen deuce with the queen of hearts, and all of a sudden, I find myself holding the nut flush draw on the board. The turn comes the ace of spades, so now I also have trip aces with a redraw to the nut boat. Action checks around to the early position player, who leads out for 10. I don't have much down, but with 2 draws to the nuts on board, I make the call. So do 2 other players, and we head 4 ways to the river. I will take any heart, an ace, a king, a 10, or a deuce, dealer. Do you think you can find one of those in the deck? Of course not. River is the 7 of diamonds, and I have nothing, zip, zero, nada. Hey man, I love me some Motorhead, but when Lemmy sang the chase is better than the catch, something tells me the dude never played Drawmaha, cause that's some major bullshit. And here we are, final hand of the evening. I look down at king 9-9-7-5, and the flop comes 7-6-8 with 2 clubs. Boom! I flop the virtual nuts, as I'm only beat by 9-10, but I'm holding 2 9s, so there's a very low chance that's gonna happen. Under the gun bets $18, called by the middle position player and the button. In retrospect, I think I could have shoved here, especially because I remember thinking that I was going to go with this hand at that point, so not sure why I didn't pull the trigger right there and then. Instead, I just made the call. Draw time comes around, and I'm going to hold on to my pair of 9s as well as my 5 to keep my straight on the board. I draw 2 cards. I didn't know how many cards the other players drew because I was pretty much seeing red at this point, and my focus was on the Omaha hand. I draw a useless deuce and a jack. The turn comes the 5 of diamonds, action checks around. When the river comes the 4 of hearts, I'm pretty confident I have the best hand on the board, and because action checked around on the turn, I think I might have a chance of finally scooping a pot by going all in. So that's what I do. I shove my remaining $52. The under the gun player snap calls,
"Finish him!"
Hey, that's not very nice. Anyway, as I mentioned before, I'm pretty confident I have the best Omaha hand, as only 9-10 beats me and I have 2 9s in my hand. But I'm sure you won't be surprised to find out that my opponent did have 9-10. Not only that, but they also had a pair of 9s down, but they outkicked me with ace king.
Fatality! Outstanding.